The militarisation and weaponisation of space has been going on since the dawn of the space age, but it has recently become very dangerous and extremely worrying. The race for space has always been about missiles, political prestige, and achieving military control of the skies. Its origins were in the Cold War nuclear arms race between the Soviet Union and the United States, and both sides were aided by German scientists and missile technology taken from Adolf Hitler's missile program at the end of World War II. This will be a very brief outline of the space warfighting developments by the United States and examples of how the war in Ukraine is being used to test and improve space warfighting systems. It's mainly focused on the US because that's where we get most information, but also because the US is a major force driving others on to their own developments. Similar things will be happening in China, Russia, India, and elsewhere. Space became the ultimate military high ground in the 1991 Iraq War and became increasingly important in subsequent wars. Then, in 1997, US Space Command released its Vision for 2020, which describes the goal of the US as being to achieve full spectrum dominance, military superiority on land, at sea, in the air, in space, and of information. And in 2019, Donald Trump authorized the US Space Force, saying, "There is going to be a lot of things happening in space, because space is the world's newest warfighting domain." And Secretary of Defense Mark Esper added, "Maintaining American dominance in that domain is now the mission of the United States Space Force." In response, President Putin said that Russia needed to develop its own space forces further and made it clear that US expansion in space posed a threat to Russian interests. The US military is continually warning of the threats posed by Chinese and Russian ambitions in space, but they forget to mention their own desire to maintain dominance there. And maintaining military dominance does not come cheap. Government spending on space is increasing, and the US government is spending far more than anyone else. The Space Force budgetary requests for 2024 is $30.3 billion. This would be a 15% increase from the previous year, and a near doubling of the budget since the first one 4 years ago. In 2020, Space Force announced a new command structure consisting of 3 commands: Space Operations Command, Space Systems Command, and Space Training and Readiness Command, under which there are units called deltas and garrisons. The deltas are responsible for specific operations, and garrisons are responsible for providing support functions to deltas. The first 11 deltas are assigned to Space Operations Command, with tasks as shown here: training, space domain awareness, electronic warfare, missile warning, command and control, cyberspace operations, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, satellite communications and navigation warfare, orbital warfare, and the 2 Buckley and Peterson-Schriever garrisons. It's worth looking at what some of these activities are. The aim of dominating and controlling space requires an ability to monitor everything that goes on there. This is known as space domain awareness and is the role of Space Delta II. Data is collected from a variety of space sensors and ground-based telescopes and radars and is combined with intelligence sources to produce a picture of the space environment. It enables the military to monitor the activities of others in space and can provide data for targeting of anti-satellite systems. The Farlingdale's Large Phased Array radar near me in the UK is a 1989 to 1992 Raytheon upgrade of a system originally built by RCA in 1962. It's also a part of the US Ballistic Missile Warning System, which comes under Space Delta IV. An officer of Space Delta IV is present on the base to advise on operational issues. Space Force's Space Fence is a second-generation space surveillance system located at Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Built by Lockheed Martin at a cost of $1.6 billion, it became operational in March 2020. The Space Surveillance Network tracks about 26,000 objects, and according to a news release, the addition of the Space Fence will increase the catalogue size significantly over time. A new addition to the Space Surveillance Network will be the Deep Space Advanced Radar capability, or DARC. In February 2022, Space Force awarded Northrop Grumman a $341 million contract to build the first DARC radar, and the whole system will consist of 3 bases located in Texas, Australia and Britain, which will be able to detect an object the size of a football up to 36,000 kilometers away. The radar will be able to detect, track, identify and characterize objects in geosynchronous orbit, where a lot of military surveillance and communication satellites are stationed. The development of hypersonic missiles, whose speed and maneuverability make them very difficult to detect and intercept, has been a recent focus. The US and China have already conducted several tests, and Russia has claimed it has used hypersonic missiles in Ukraine. There are 2 major types: the hypersonic glide vehicle, which leaves the Earth's atmosphere and then plunges back into it, and the hypersonic cruise missile, which, while not as fast, flies low and at extremely high speeds, giving opponents little time to react. So the US Missile Defense Agency is developing a constellation of hypersonic and ballistic tracking space sensor satellites to detect and intercept hypersonics as part of the next generation overhead persistent infrared satellite system. Missiles will be tracked along the satellite constellation, and information passed to the satellites equipped with more advanced sensors can then provide targeting data for interceptors. L3Harris Technologies has completed the final major design stage of the on-orbit prototype demonstration system and has already begun building the demonstration satellite. Space Force's Space War Fighting Analysis Center is responsible for conducting analysis, modelling and wargaming, and also investigating the design of missile warning, tracking and defence systems. Space Delta III is responsible for space electronic warfare. In March 2020, Space Force received its first space weapon, a ground-based satellite communications radio frequency jamming system. Disrupting satellite signals can affect the ability of the military to communicate, to command and control distributed systems, and to identify and home in on targets. Space Force will be ordering 30 of these portable upgraded systems to combat Chinese and Russian space-based technology. L3Harris received a $125 million contract for the upgrade, which could be ready in 2024. Delta VI is developing cyber warfare techniques and support for military satellites, and a new space-end crypto unit to help protect the network from cyber attacks, jamming and other electromagnetic interference. Northrop Grumman will work with Aeronix to build the prototype system. And Space Force also has a unit called Delta IX, established in July 2020, which is developing the secretive Boeing X-37B military spaceplane. There is also a unit called Space Delta 18, which acts as the National Space Intelligence Center to provide intelligence on threats, intentions and activities in space. It's working to establish a national test and training complex to create accurate digital training environments for space wargaming. Currently, Space Force does not have an interest in activities beyond the Earth's orbit. However, this may change, and others are already looking at the possibilities of using nuclear energy to power deep space missions, bases on the Moon and on Mars, and the mining of planetary bodies. and aerospace corporations, the nuclear industry and Space Force are looking at nuclear-powered satellites as a way of either dodging space weapons or perhaps powering them. Recently, the war in Ukraine has drawn attention to the use of commercial satellites to track troop movements and monitor the impact of attacks. The US, UK and others have pumped billions of dollars worth of arms and equipment into the Ukrainian army to keep the war going, and arms companies are filling their pockets. Last year, Ukrainian Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov openly offered Ukraine as a venue to test NATO weapons against Russia and as a testing ground for a US war with China. General John W. Raymond, head of space operations at US Space Force, has said that the aerospace industry has helped Kiev each and every day. Satellites, drones, artificial intelligence and cyber capabilities have been central to the war since the start, and NATO has launched a €1 billion investment fund for innovation to, I quote, help bring to life those nascent technologies that have the power to transform our security in the decades to come, end quote. And of course, Space Force has its own initiatives. Classified and commercial US satellites have provided Ukraine with intelligence on Russian troop movements, and SpaceX has delivered 15,000 Starlink satellite internet kits to Ukraine to enable citizens' internet access. However, it's also been used to target Russian positions with drones, which was breaking policies set out by SpaceX. Last February, SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell explained that Starlink technology was never meant to be weaponized, and confirmed that while it was okay for the Ukrainian military to deploy Starlink technology for communications, the intent was never to have them use it for offensive purposes. She said the company had taken steps to limit the abilities of the Ukrainian armed forces to use Starlink in an offensive way, without giving any further details. Meanwhile, Russia has also claimed that its Tirada 2 system has found ways to disable ground-to-satellite connections as used by Starlink. Cyber attacks and signal jamming have been common activities in Ukraine, as have the development of countermeasures. The war has increased the use of drones, rockets and electronic warfare in the battlefield. A small drone fitted with modern digital optics and a secure data link can give even the smallest combat unit a view of the battlefield and the ability to see ahead, a mile or so behind enemy lines. The war in Ukraine has also been used to put missile defence back on the agenda. As previously mentioned, Russia has claimed it has successfully deployed hypersonic missiles in Ukraine, and the US has started to develop satellite networks as a defence. But why is all this particularly worrying now? Well, in May, Brigadier General Jesse Morehouse at US Space Command said that the Russian aggression and Chinese vision to become the dominant space power by mid-century had left the US with no choice but to prepare for orbital skirmishes. Morehouse said, if someone was to threaten the United States of America or any of our interests, we're ready to fight tonight. He added, we have a variety of capabilities we can bring to bear and will continue to develop capabilities that allow us to maintain a credible deterrence posture. So there is a real need for a halt to the space arms race. International cooperation and agreements must be achieved soon to prevent further damage to the Earth and the space environment. However, neither the spirit nor the letter of the 1967 Outer Space Treaty is being taken seriously, and space exploration has given way to exploitation. We urgently need new, up-to-date agreements. A UN open-ended working group on reducing space threats through norms, rules and principles of responsible behaviours was convened in February 2022, and the first and second sessions were held in Geneva the same year, with the third taking place last January. but not a lot of real progress has been made. Will it take too long to be meaningful? In the meantime, huge steps are being taken too quickly to further militarise and weaponise space. The international community must engage now to ensure strategies are adopted to create a sustainable future on Earth and in space. If you have been, thanks for listening.